It is time for Truth to Power with Kyle Wallace on 620 WTMJ Podcast, Spotify, and Apple Music, and streaming on YouTube. Now, here is your award-winning host, Kyle Wallace.
Hello and welcome into Truth to Power here on the 620 WTMJ Podcast Network. We're coming to you live from the Pella Windows and Doors of Wisconsin podcast studio at the Market Hall in downtown Milwaukee. I am Kyle Wallace, the host of Truth to Power, and what a week it has been. We're going to have a great conversation today because we are going to talk about the primary election, specifically the Democratic gubernatorial primary election that was electric and an absolute stunner of what we saw on Tuesday night as David Crowley, the comeback kid, was able to scratch and claw over the last 2 weeks of campaigning to pick up the huge upset over Francesca Hong. We're going to talk about that today because that was a crazy election that we had. And a lot of folks are disappointed. A lot of folks are upset. But one thing that you should have learned from that election, y'all, is you should have learned that polls don't matter. Polls, they do not matter. It was the slimmest and thinnest of margins, and it just seems like when it comes to election day that a lot of folks that were maybe the undecideds ended up all going for David Crowley, and he won by a razor-thin margin by less than 4,000 votes. The wild counties were the difference. I understand people talk about Kelda Royce taking votes from from Francesca Hong, but the wild counties were the difference in the election. That is Waukesha, that is Ozaukee, and that is Washington County Democrats. They came out and they supported David Crowley and gave him a big enough cushion for him to be able to defeat Francesca Hong, and that was a big upset. And for me, y'all, I think the biggest takeaway that people should have from this election, it should be the fact that don't just assume that the polls are right. And for those who are expecting a blue wave come November for the Democratic Party on a national scale, do not assume that the polls that are telling you a blue wave is coming, don't believe they are right. When you see them talking about James Tellerico down in Texas over Kim Paxton, is it going to be a close race? Absolutely. Polls saying he's winning. Could that be true? Maybe, but don't believe the polls. Don't believe the polls about Josh Turek down in Iowa where it's a close race for him. Don't believe the polls that are telling you that Roy Cooper is going to win his election in North Carolina. Don't believe the polls or what they're trying to tell you in Maine about Troy Jackson and him going to win that election potentially. Listen, I understand a blue wave is probably coming, but what you should learn from the election in Wisconsin, specifically the Democratic primary, y'all, you should learn that people vote, not polls. And if you don't get out and vote, and you listen to the polls and you say, oh, they got it, you'll end up maybe taking an L. I'm not going to say folks didn't get out and vote for Francesca Hong because she got over 300,000 votes. And shout out to the folks who got out and voted on Tuesday night because that was a very close election and they got out to vote. The Democratic Party spoke. They got exactly what they wanted. They got the candidate that they wanted. And so with that being said, that's it. David Crowley won the election, and he'll be representing the Democratic Party when it comes to the gubernatorial race coming in November. And before we get more to talking about the results of the election and the impact of the election, I want to just talk about one thing first, because we need to discuss the central, the central count, Milwaukee Central Count debacle. Because that's what it was. It was a complete debacle where 28,000 absentee ballot votes were supposed to get counted at not counted, but they're supposed to turn into flash drives around 10:30, but then it got pushed back all the way to 1:30 in the morning. And I just want people to understand, Milwaukee did not cheat. I want y'all to understand that, yes, it was a debacle, but Milwaukee did not cheat. Milwaukee didn't just misplace flash drives. Milwaukee didn't try to cheat to have David Crowley win. That is not what happened. Milwaukee did not cheat. For those who are watching, for those who are unfamiliar with Milwaukee, Milwaukee did what it does best, is have a damn crapshoot, have a damn debacle, have something that, we always basically have some type of gaffe in some of the biggest moments when it comes to these elections. But I just want people to understand that when you're looking at this election and you might be frustrated about a loss that your candidate might have taken, I just want you to understand that Milwaukee did not cheat. Milwaukee just showed you the exact reason why this city, it can't get right. That was the epitome of the city of Milwaukee, the city that I absolutely raised, the city I was born and raised in. That right there was an epitome of what the city deals with, of why we just cannot get right, of why we have so many hurdles that we have to overcome. It just seems like we can't get things right on the first try. So I don't want people to sit there and look at what happened on Election Day when it comes to the Milwaukee Central Command and the Milwaukee Central count for the election to think that, the Milwaukee Election Commission was cheating. No, that wasn't the case. David Crowley won fair and square in the city of Milwaukee. It was just the city of Milwaukee constantly has issues, and that's why, they always talk about the late drop from the city of Milwaukee. There's bigger issues with the fact that you can't start counting ballots until a certain time here in the state of Wisconsin, Election Day. But I don't want people, especially folks on the Democratic side, to start being election deniers, to start saying, Trump has a point. Look at this with Milwaukee. And honestly, I want to applaud Mayor Cavalier Johnson, because Mayor Cavalier Johnson and the Milwaukee Election Commission, they were extremely transparent. And just because your candidate lost, or just because things seem very weird and funny, doesn't mean that people tried to cheat. The Milwaukee Election Commission was extremely transparent. You had cameras that were literally in different locations counting up, or not counting up, but watching the process behind the scenes when it comes to the election. There was 100% transparency. It just was a debacle in the end, and that's what we have to deal with here in the city of Milwaukee. Y'all, Milwaukee just did what it always does. And, we always just have something that just ends up going wrong on Election Day, and hopefully they'll get it together. But what's so funny is that those who are not familiar with the way Milwaukee gets down on Election Day when it comes to always having some type of issue when it comes to our ballots getting counted or just something not going right, even though Milwaukee was extremely transparent when it came to this. So if you have any questions, you can just go back and you can watch and just see that it was human error indeed, and that has to be corrected. We'll talk about that. But the funniest thing is that, on Election Day, you have Wolf Blitzer, you have Steve Kornacki, you have all these different folks on these national television stations that are, on the board talking about where the votes are coming from. And Steve Kornacki from MS Now, NBC, was tracking and following the Wisconsin election because he understood that there were 28,000 absentee ballots that were going to basically decide the direction that the election was going to go in the state of Wisconsin. And Steve Kornacki, when he found out that what was said is something irregular happening with the election in Milwaukee, this is his reaction when he found out that we were not about to find out how the 28,000 votes went, that they're going to have to start the process over. Go ahead and watch Steve Kornacki from MS Now and NBC and his reaction to finding out that Milwaukee always just has problems on Election Day.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
They have to. What were they? Okay.
It appears there were some irregularities in the reporting process, so I think they have to go back to the city location and do some work there, and then potentially kind of restart that process. That's what I'm gathering.
So we're back to square one on this.
Potentially, and they have to restart that process. So they have to go back to the city location, I think re-grab the memory sticks or go through that vote process again and then bring it back to the county.
Are we talking hours?
It would feel that way given, we got the 30-minute watch process started at 11 and it's now 1 a.m.
Well, there's no traffic at this hour. I guess that's good.
Yes.
Are
Are
you serious?
Yeah.
They have to. What were they? Okay. How do I ask this artfully? Okay. Do we still have an audience?
Yeah, there's still a bunch of people tuned in.
I mean, just funny video right there. I mean, that is Milwaukee in a nutshell. Steve Kornacki was absolutely shocked, but our city just cannot get right. But I just want to emphasize to everybody, though, you can trust the election process. And I think it's important for not just to, fight back against Trump. I don't even care. Forget all that. I think it's important for those who, at the end of the day, people win and they lose elections. But I think election integrity is something that is imperative and something that's important for people to have confidence and trust that the election process is clean, that the election process can be trusted. And I want to let you know that David Crowley won fair and square in the city of Milwaukee. But to those voters who may not feel confident in the election process and the integrity in the city of Milwaukee, it is the duty of Milwaukee Mayor Cavalier Johnson to ensure that folks have confidence in our elections here in the city of Milwaukee. Now, mistakes happen. I understand it was human error. And for Cavalier Johnson, he now has a responsibility who I applaud him for the transparency. I applaud him for pushing back because he did exactly what good leaders do. They push back and they say, we're going to have full transparency, and they allow cameras anywhere and everywhere when it came to the election. But I'm going to say this. As a good leader, you also need to hold people accountable. And yes, what happened on Tuesday night was a failure by the Milwaukee Election Commission. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about that. It was a failure. And I know nobody's going to lose their job over this, which is okay. But what I will say is this. You got some 80-some days to make sure they get it right. And it is on Cavalier Johnson to talk to that election commission to say, do not embarrass us, and make sure that we are buttoned up. Make sure our I's are dotted, our T's are crossed. Because if anything happens on Election Day, when you're talking about a Trump MAGA-loving politician, you're talking about an election denier in Tom Tiffany. If Milwaukee has a big dump that ends up putting David Crowley over the top, best to believe if anything goes wrong, that the federal government will be here in the city of Milwaukee trying to say that the election did not count, trying to say that they tried to cheat for David Crowley. So I am asking for Mayor Cavalier Johnson to make sure that y'all get buttoned up. Because the Francesca Hong voters, they're going to kind of be like, they're going to be upset, but they're not going to push the envelope. They're not going to sit there and they're not going to picket. They're not going to protest. They're not going to say, this is a cheat. This is a scam. They're not going to do that. But y'all know come November, if we are not buttoned up in the city of Milwaukee, if we end up having some type of debacle where something happens with flash drives and there's 80,000 absentee ballots that have to be counted and something bad happens, the federal government is going to get involved, and we do not need that in the city of Milwaukee. So Mayor Cavalier Johnson, make sure your team at that Milwaukee Election Commission is on top of it. On top of it. Because the last thing we want is something bad to happen now, and especially when it comes to 2028, because you best to believe in 2028. They will do anything and they will say anything to keep power and to keep control. Do not give them a reason. Do not give them an excuse to bring that nonsense to our city. So we got to make sure that we get it right before 2028, because I promise y'all this, if anything happens in November, they're going to be in our city in 2028. Trying to already say if something doesn't go their way that we cheated. And we don't need that. Again, this is Truth to Power. Kyle Wallace here on the 620 WTMJ Podcast Network. And now I just want to reflect on the stunning election, because this was an upset, y'all. This was an absolute stunner. All the polls, the Marquette poll, the Up North poll, the Navigate poll, they had all the polls said Francesca Hong was going to win in a landslide. They all said Francesca Hong was going to beat everybody in the race in a landslide, and that is not what happened. And I think what we learned in this election, y'all, we learned the power of influence. Tony Evers flexed that. I wouldn't say he got a big muscle, but he flexed that muscle, and he showed everybody the power of influence. And it also showed people the state of Wisconsin, the Democrats in Wisconsin, though a Democratic socialist and Francesca Hong got a poop ton of votes. She got 300,000 votes, and she ran a hell of a campaign that we're going to talk about. The state of Wisconsin is still purple. The Democratic Party in the state of Wisconsin is still purple. And electability is something that matters the most to everybody, especially when you're talking about what they are up against. Electability, it mattered. And we saw that when it comes to the election results on Tuesday night. David Crowley won by a slim margin, but he still won and he still was victorious. And I think at this point now, it is time for the Democratic Party to come together. And I'm telling y'all, one of my biggest fears is how the Francesca Hong voters are going to react. Because what happened was you had a candidate in David Crowley who dropped out of the race for a week. He booked a trip to Jamaica. He said, I'm about to take a vacation. I'm about to go relax. And then he jumped back into the field and he got the endorsement of Tony Evers. He literally got the endorsement of Tony Evers, and Tony Evers in a span of 2 to 3 weeks was able to help push David Crowley over the top. Now, it's not just about him boosting David Crowley. It's about repairing the Democratic Party. Because the race overall was a very friendly race, but Tony Evers went negative. He did, and it did not make a lot of voters on Francesca Hong's side very happy. The ads that we saw that were negative towards Francesca Hong, it was friendly fire. It is something that the Democratic Party is going to have to repair. As David Crowley tries to expand the electorate and expand the different voters that are going to get out and support him come November, they also need to do some repair of the voters for Francesca Hong, because a lot of people are going to be upset. A lot of people are going to be upset because let's just be 100% honest. Francesca Hong ran the best campaign in the state of Wisconsin. I know she had some stuff in the end that didn't go right for her, but Francesca Hong, she campaigned her ass off in this election. She had 7,000 volunteers knocking on doors across the state of Wisconsin. She had a goal of knocking on 500,000 doors in the state of Wisconsin. They were phenomenal on social media. They ran a hell of a campaign. Now, they dropped the ball in the end, and Tony Evers was able to throw enough salt in the game in order to make people go into the ballot box and look at who they wanted to vote for and say, do I want to vote for somebody who inspires me, or do I want to vote for somebody who I believe can get elected? A lot of folks voted for inspiration, but more people voted for electability with David Crowley. And so now it's a duty, just like Tony Evers was out there campaigning and trying to get David Crowley elected. He needs to go out there. He needs to use his platform. He needs to use his voice to let the Francesca Hong voters know, to let the Democratic Socialists know that there is a person in David Crowley for them, that David Crowley is the candidate for them. And again, this is why when I talked about the fact of the establishment candidate, and it's not a slur. I know, folks, I was so passionate about it. I know it ruffles some feathers in the Crowley camp. I understand that. But the thing is that David Crowley has proven that he has a track record of getting things done here in this Milwaukee County. David Crowley did so well up until now in his political career that he had people like Tony Evers who wanted to back him. He had people like the Democratic Party on the national stage that wanted to back him. Gwen Moore wanted to back him. Like, yes, the establishment won this election, but now it's time for the establishment to let those who feel disenfranchised, have those who feel left out, have those who feel like it was unfair. It is on the establishment. It is on David Crowley. It is on Tony Evers. It is on the Democratic Party nationally to ensure that the individuals who voted for Francesca Hong, who may want to sit this out like they sat out the 2016 election, they need to make them a priority as well. You want those votes. You cannot take one single vote for granted. If anybody should learn anything about these elections, when you win by 3,800 votes, you should not take a single vote for granted. So they must campaign to make sure that those folks from Francesca Hong who love Francesca Hong, that they continue to vote in November. Because what we're up against come November is something bigger than anything we've seen here in the state of Wisconsin when it comes to a MAGA Republican. So for the Francesca voters who may feel like they got screwed, which, again, you did not get screwed. It's just that's how elections go. There's winners and there's losers when it comes to that. You didn't get cheated either. It's just how the cookie crumbled. And now it's time for people to really think about the fact that it should be vote blue no matter who if you voted for a Democrat in August, or I should say a couple days ago. And I want you to be sad. I want you to be upset. I want you to be frustrated with the system, but I don't want you to sit out in November. Because if you sit out in November, all you are doing is elevating something completely opposite to the message that Francesca Hong was preaching. So it is going to take for everybody to understand that August was not the finish line. The finish line comes in November. The baton has been passed to David Crowley, and now it is going to take for everybody that voted blue in August and more to get behind and support and push David Crowley across the finish line so he finishes in first place, because the other guy on the other side is not something that you want to see, because we have not seen a MAGA Republican on the top of a ticket for a Wisconsin gubernatorial race before. And you will not like the results. So don't hold grudges when it comes to this election, y'all, because if you hold a grudge when it comes to this election, you will end up with a MAGA Republican and Tom Tiffany, and that will be hellacious for anybody who voted blue. Anybody who voted blue in August. You will hate the way the state of Wisconsin is going. We remember what Scott Walker was like. He would be worse. So as you heal from the sadness of losing, understand that the end goal was not just about August. The end goal was about having representation continued in the governor's mansion. And that is what David Crowley represents. And for David Crowley and for his team, y'all have to understand that you need to talk to these Francesca Hong voters, and you have to let them know there is a home with you. You have to let them know you're going to listen to them, and you're going to listen to some of their ideas, because she has some phenomenal ideas. You need to be inspirational so they feel like they can feel connected to you. And David Crowley got to get ready for this campaign. And I know a lot of folks in the Crowley campaign weren't happy with my thoughts and my opinions, but guess what? We all have opinions. Everybody has a right to their opinions. Everybody has a right to their thoughts. You saw the thoughts of our governor and Tony Evers when it came to Francesca Hong, so everybody has a right to that. But instead of being upset at me, we need to understand what I was saying was rooted in facts. My concerns and my worries were rooted in facts, because I want the most electable candidate in the race. That is what I want. I want Wisconsin to stay blue, because I understand the opportunity that we have with a trifecta and how that can just enhance the lives of so many people in the state of Wisconsin from so many different backgrounds across the beautiful state of Wisconsin. So I hope that the Crowley campaign is ready to fight and defend at the same time. Y'all gonna need to be on the offensive and defensive on the same time. Y'all need to hit this pedophile loving and supporting individual in Tom Tiffany, because he voted not to release the Epstein files. So if you voted not to release the Epstein files, you're a pedophile protector to me. But David Crowley has to be ready to defend his record. David Crowley and his team have to have a message for why we are facing a $50 million budget deficit. Let them know how we got here. They gonna talk about it, but let them know how we got here. David Crowley is going to have to defend the fact that there's a $15 million budget deficit for the Milwaukee County transit system. Be ready to understand and tell people how we got there and what your plan is. You're going to have to defend the fact that property taxes have gone up in Milwaukee County. You have to be ready to defend the fact that there was a sales tax increase with Act 12, but you got to tell them why we had to have Act 12. You got to tell them why. Because there's Republicans like Tom Tiffany refuse to give us the shared revenue. So you have to be ready to defend yourself. You defend what happened with the healthcare lapse, where folks didn't lose their healthcare, but there was a lapse in the contract with healthcare. You're going to have to be ready to defend that. So folks can get disappointed or mad at me, whatever the hell it is, from my opinion based off of facts. But David Crowley has to be ready to defend that and be able to go on the offensive, because we need him to win this election. He has to be prepared to be able to attack Tom Tiffany, but he also has to be prepared to let everybody know his vision for the state of Wisconsin. Because let's be honest, we know that David Crowley, his campaign was not the best campaign. And a lot of people don't know what they were voting for. They knew they was voting to try to keep Francesca Hong from being the representative for the Democratic Party. And they don't really know exactly what his platform is. You gotta explain your platform. You gotta inspire folks. Let them understand where you stand when it comes to affordable housing, where you stand when it comes to inflation, where you stand when it comes to education, where you stand when it comes to healthcare, where you stand when it comes to everybody having equal and free rights, where you stand when it comes to uplifting people in the state of Wisconsin. You have to let everybody know where your priorities are and what your platform is, and we gotta get behind you. We cannot let Tom Tiffany win. So again, go and let those Francesca Hong voters know that you got their back and that you will be the governor for them. And for those, and I know I talked about this before on my show, and actually the Crowley Crowley folks were excited when I talked about having to be an African-American man and have to overcome things. Do understand that being an African-American candidate, you can't be okay, you can't be good, you can't be great, you have to be excellent, you have to be flawless. You have to win over these independent voters, and many of these independent voters are white people. And in order for them to say, yes, we want to vote for you because since you have to be perfect, Tom Tiffany ain't got to be perfect. And we know he ain't. David Crowley has to be perfect with his words. He has to be perfect with his speech. He has to be perfect the way he stumps. He has to be perfect in the way that he connects with them. That's what he has to be, because as a black man, we understand, as black people, we understand that we have to be 2 times better, 3 times better, 10 times better in order for people to trust us and have confidence in us. The baton has been passed to David Crowley, and now it's time for him to sprint across the finish line. That's what time it is. This has been Truth to Power with Kyle Wallace on the 620 WTMJ Podcast Network. Again, I appreciate y'all always tuning in, chiming in. I know y'all kind of caught me during a time where we're having interviews and talking a lot of politics. Oh, we talk politics, but we also talk local issues as well. So for those who are new here, what up? I'm glad y'all joining us. I hope you feel entertained. Make sure y'all subscribe so you don't miss any of your Truth to Power shows. But we're going to talk about national issues. We're going to talk about local issues. We're going to talk about state issues. We're going to talk about policy. And we're also going to talk about entertainment, because that's what Truth to Power is. But thank y'all so much for tuning in today on the 620 WTMJ Podcast Network, the Truth to Power with Kyle Wallace. You can always catch all your favorite shows and go back to listen to all your favorite shows on the Truth to Power playlist on the 620 WTMJ YouTube page. On top of that, you can go to 620WTMJ.com and go back and listen to all your favorite Truth to Power shows. You can go to Spotify, you can go to TuneIn, you can go to Apple Podcasts or listen to all the current shows or even the shows way back before you became a fan of Truth to Power. But I appreciate y'all tuning in, and until next week, I'll see y'all. Have a great rest of your day.